Welcome to Advertising Champions, your go-to resource for the dynamic world of advertising and marketing. And I'm your host, Tony Stanol. Today we are visiting with Darcy Bevelacqua, who is the CEO of Successworks CX. Welcome, Darcy.
Thank you for having me today.
Now, Darcy, we have some common ground in that we're kind of in the same west coast of Florida location area, but also because of the overlap in our recruiting. But even before you were an executive recruiter, you had a past life. Why don't you touch on that, and then we'll get into what you're doing today.
Right. I actually started my career as a marketer. So I was climbing up the CMO channel as most people do, but I really had a big expertise in the technology side and the analytics side. So eventually, after working in companies, I went to Accenture and was a consultant for a lot of other large companies. And from there, I ended up going into executive recruiting and finally to career coaching.
Right. It's kind of a natural progression and evolution of what you're doing. And what's your focus today?
My focus today is really helping people 50 plus move to careers that make sense for them. As people age, their definition of what success is changes. When your first career, it's making enough money to move out of your parents' house and learn something new. As you're in mid-career, it's usually climbing the ladder. And by the time you're getting to 50, you're starting to think about making an impact on the world and creating kind of a legacy. So your values and your criteria for success change as you age.
Right. There's a lot of frustration out there, particularly in the advertising industry, where it's commonly known as a young man's game. 5% of the workforce is over the age of 50 in the U.S. It's much higher in other industries and in other countries. But what are you seeing with people's frustration?
Well, I think especially in marketing and advertising, you're considered old when you're actually almost 40. So it's one of those professions where you get old, age out quickly. So if you're really interested in continuing your career and using the skills you've got, you need to start thinking differently about how to apply those skills to have the impact that you want. And it may or may not be working in an agency. It may or may not be working at a company. It may be at a startup. Certainly you have skills that you can contribute, but how you talk about them has to change. Because one of the skills that you've got as you age is you're probably better at managing people. You're great at getting along with clients and understanding what their needs are and helping translate those to the team. And you're good at synthesizing information and figuring out kind of what are the biggest priorities that the team should work on.
Right. Give us an example of how maybe recently you helped someone in their career transition.
Well, I actually had a CMO who was trying to figure out if they were going to switch sides or not. And they ended up starting a nonprofit. So they really went in a totally different direction. I had a guy from an ad agency who's had lots of creative experience. And he has now gone on to not just doing advertising design, but human-centric design, and has gone back to school for that and is starting to work in that field as well.
Wow. Well, that'll ring true to a lot of people who listen to this podcast. But last few words, Darcy. What can you say by way of hope for people who are knocking on the door of 50 or 60 and are just really wringing their hands about the situation in the workforce?
Well, the first thing to do is really take an assessment of who you are, what are your real strengths, and what are your personal values, because you need to really know who you are to move forward, because you can't emphasize what you're best at and what you can do if you really don't understand it yourself. Then you need to open the door and think a little more creatively about where can I apply those skills where they would have a positive impact and could make a difference in the world. And it may be helping a nonprofit. I think it's time to start thinking differently. As you're getting older, you can think about how do I multiply my skills and teach others how to do a lot of the things I'm really good at? How do I ask the right questions to look at the world a different way and not just keep trekking along in the way you've been looking at the world? Because I think you'll find that you're feeling blocked and not being able to achieve. And that's pretty frustrating as you get older and you have a lot of skills.
Right. And one thing you didn't mention is it probably helps to hold hands with a career transition professional like yourself.
I do think that that can be useful. It's also important really to keep networking because some of your
Mm,
friends that know you well and associates have also great ideas and great connections for you. So I would say never stop networking, even if you love your job. If you're really making a big transition and you're frustrated, get a career coach to help you because lots of people are wasting time on things that as you're older are not useful. Applying for jobs online, if you're 50 plus, is pretty much a waste of time. Your chances of actually getting a really good job are almost nothing.
great,
So
great
it's not a good.
advice. Terrific advice for, I think, for a lot of our listeners. I had someone on the podcast earlier who was, you know, in his 50s or so and just frustrated because he's freelancing. He'd love to have a permanent position. But thanks for being with us today, Darcy.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody, and keep thinking you're going to be successful.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Advertising Champions. You could find out more about us at dailynewsnetwork.com. And we'll see you next time.
We've been around for 16 years, working with clients, with thousands of clients. We're working with agencies to be able to scale them and grow them and provide them services that would cost them way more than it would for them to do it themselves. Anything oriented around lead generation, video creation, web design, we're full service, so we can really serve most people.